is the seesaw searchlight at Fort Victoria in the Isle of Wight. 3 unknown in the world, and this is the only one you can actually see. These are carbon arc, and these will throw a beam 4 or 5 miles to illuminate ships and protect the western ends of the passage. Because although you've got Hurst Castle, Fort Victoria, you've got Fort Albert, of course at night it's dark, so the searchlights right around the coast of the Isle of Wight to protect against invasion and later against spies being dropped. The idea here was, searchlights are very expensive, sitting there, if you shoot at them, you damage them. The idea here was that the seesaw was a mirror. So the light is protected under the concrete parapet, first designed, let's say, in 1888, and that the mirror is then used to direct the beam. By the fact this is the last one in existence, didn't really catch on. Very cumbersome, very difficult to actually focus and to direct. As I say, now the last one left in the world, powered by steam as well. So the carbon arc light in here, and behind you in the cliffs here is a complete underground power station. Tunnels that lead into it, big chimney stacks up there, and in fact this whole encampment and headland was full of defensive protections. You'd have probably 400 or 500 men based here, and the idea was this was part of the protection for 120 years to protect the western approach to the Solent. Well, they say the sea reclaims everything. So when I first came here 15-20 years ago, this was a complete World War II searchlight, directly behind the seesaw, which was a technology that was never going to have a future. This was a 90 centimetre, again carbon arc, with a power station left on site, its own generator, a searchlight battery here, and a machine gun post next door, again to protect the entries to the west coast of Solent. But as you can see, the last 4 or 5 years of storm, it is now washed away, and within 10 years all trace of this will be lost, as has happened with many World War II and even World War I coastal defences. It's almost down to us as historians to just record and capture and document, because for a moment in time these were important places. They were literally looking at the German Armada coming up there, and these would have been the front line. In 1940, Winston Churchill declared that the U-boats were the greatest threat to the British Isles, to Western civilization. There was really no defence against them in 1940. So in 1918, just over here in Portsmouth, they develop a system which is essentially passive detection. It's a cable that will go under the sea and loop back again, probably 2 miles. And if anything goes across that cable, the natural magnetism in that metal hull or submarine will be detected. Now, these systems were known as loop detection or anti-submarine loops, and it's a technology that's now disappeared and largely been forgotten. First rolled out in 1918, by 1936, as the threat of war comes again, they're going to start and roll out these loop detection systems in every Allied harbour. Here on the Isle of Wight, we've now found 28 systems. The work to put these cables under the sea on the eastern coast of the island, 6 miles to the Nab Tower, and then 6 miles to the mainland in concentric rings. You've got to remember that in 1940 there was a huge paranoia about spies being dropped by submarine, also commandos coming aboard on the Isle of Wight to steal radar systems. Now, it sounds fanciful. In 1942 we do it at Bruneval, and then try 6 weeks later to do it at Dieppe, and where we captured the entire radar equipment, the operator and the manuals. So this threat of submarines, this hidden weapon under the sea. So they started to deploy 1936 loop detection systems. Today, 90 years later, those systems are still here. If you look here, we're on a beach just by Fort Victoria. Here is, just washed out in the recent storm, a loop detection cable. Manufactured continuous length, this cable would have looped all the way across the Solent, almost to the shore on the other side, then looped back. It runs through the woods into a dedicated loop detection centre, and in there 3 or 4 Women's Royal Navy Service ladies would have sat there, and they're watching a galvanometer, literally a piece of paper and a needle. Should a ship go over it, or a submarine, that needle will dance. But this is just one cable of 6 loops across here, and as the submarine came in they could chart the direction, its speed, so they'd know, and the searchlights from just behind me would light it up. If there's nothing there, every Allied submarine coming into Portsmouth had to come in on the surface. It's a German. So they've got two solutions. The first is there's a minesweeper going up and down here. We'll come and have a discussion using depth chargers, but more importantly, just down here on the left, it still exists in the cliffs, there is a tube. That's a big cable, and across here are strung 16 huge mines. Not a secret, we're at the Centre for Mine Research at Fort Victoria. 500 pounds of amatol across the bay here. If a submarine dares to come in, it will trip the first loop aboard the battery, trip the second loop, trip the first loop, the guard loop. They count to 5, and then someone just in a hut here presses a red button and all 16 mines explode. The system is crude, but it's effective. On the Isle of Wight, we now believe that no German submarine ever got into our waters. Over in the Bristol Channel, we accounted for at least 9 submarines. The Dover system got 2. As you look over Hurst Castle to my right, just as a tribute to those times, so the Supermarine Spitfire really now, I guess, the iconic image alongside the Hurricane. In 1940, the skies above the Isle of Wight were just full of dogtails. Brass cartridges hurtling down as the planes dogfighted and weaved behind it. My mother-in-law is 89, she remembers it well. Just looking up at the fighters arcing, the anti-aircraft guns firing. The Isle of Wight was a floating gun platform. The Spitfire, of course, developed just there in Itchen, in the Supermarine factory, and indeed all the trials for the Supermarine Spitfire with the SB6 were run just down here as part of the Snyder seaplane race, designed by the legendary genius R.J. Mitchell. It was the SB6 winning the 3rd race here in a record time, flying a loop down in the Solent around the Isle of Wight that led directly to the development of the Spitfire. These Spitfires are now 2-seat. They're operated out of the famous wartime Goodwood airfield, now part of the Goodwood Festival. Run by Boltby Aviation. They're teaching new generations of Spitfire pilots. It's about £5,000 an hour, but some friends have told me it's the best £5,000 they've ever spent, because there is a time, as you go over the Needles, they do a slow victory roll, and then as you look down, you'll cast and see the shadow of your Spitfire against the white cliffs, and that's the time when I slit the surly wings of heaven, to quote the World War II poet.